Okay, so here's how to make my gumbo. All right, so first thing first, we're preparing everything. Before we even began cooking, we're preparing everything. It makes the process much easier. So here we're dicing bell pepper, we are slicing onions, and we're also slicing celery in my food processor. If you don't have one, you can most certainly do it by hand. I'm just lazy sometimes, and I knew the consistency that I wanted to go with. I'm only doing a small amount of okra, and I'll tell you why when we get to that part. But I just use like a very small bag of okra, and I slice that in the food processor as well. Now, this is my dehydrated shrimp. I'll be slicing and dicing those to a powder consistency in my food processor as well. It's rather loud. I did not want to use the volume on this. It's very loud, but this particular ingredient gives the gumbo so much flavor, and you can barely taste it. It pretty much dissolves in the broth of the gumbo, or in the in the broth. So on a lined sheet, I got my chicken thighs seasoned, and I have the remaining amount of my okra seasoned. I'm going to take my king crab, and you're going to see here where it's huge, and I will never make gumbo again without this crab. I love this crab in my gumbo. I just took it and I broke it into pieces. Now you have to be very careful with the thorns in the king crab. I just pretty much researched how to cut it, and I used a very clean, brand new towel actually to break the crab. If you have like gloves for this, you can certainly use that. You have to be very careful because those thorns are very painful. And then if you can, get a very good knife. Now this one is a little bit dull, so I struggled a bit. I didn't want to use my good knife. my rose gold knives. I know, it's crazy. I'm right here in this shell. There's more meat, and you can actually get the meat out of the little. I wouldn't add those to the actual stock itself, though. But break it down really well so that you can have it in smaller pieces, and you won't have big pieces. Cut off all of those little, I don't know, are those membranes or whatever. Cut that off completely. Don't put that in your chicken. And make sure that when you're doing your crab, you also want to make sure that you don't have any loose pieces, because you don't want loose pieces floating around in your gumbo. Okay, so I made sure that all of the pieces were secure. It wasn't loose. It wasn't anything else. Now, for my guests, I decided to do this for the consumer to make it easier. I scraped those thorns with my knife as well. So it took off the part that would puncture, that could actually literally go through your skin. By doing this, I know it's a labor of love, but it helped my kids just pick it up without being overly cautious of the thorns. So I just went around each one of these, and all of those little black pieces are the thorn part, the stickiest part. I'm not sure exactly what they call them, but I'm going to call them thorns right now. All right, so here are all the ingredients that you'll need already prepared and laid out. We have onion, bell pepper, and celery in bowl, already sliced and diced. And we again use the food plot processor for that. I'm talking actually during the video. I have my andouille sausage, my okra slurry, if you will, that I'm actually going to cook over the stove in some oil to get a little bit more of the slime out. We have my chopped pieces of large chopped pieces of king crab. We have my shrimp already seasoned, and I seasoned this with a little Cajun seasoning, pepper. We have green onion, we have parsley, we have gumbo filet. I like tomatoes in mine. It's not necessary, but I love tomatoes in mine. We have garlic. We also have a little seafood boil. You can drop a little bit of that in there for added flavor. I love it. So we also have cayenne pepper, onion powder, garlic powder. We also use bay leaves. Of course, the flour, is for the roux that we'll be making in just a moment. I have seafood stock, garlic, salt, Cajun seafood, and I love chicken bouillon powder. So if you have this, you don't need the chicken broth. I have seafood stock instead. Of course, we have the oil. The oil will help make the roux. And in our oven, you'll see that we also have the okra cooking to get the extra slime out. Okay, it's a necessary step. And we have our chicken actually baking. Now we start on the roux. I took 1/4 cup, 1 1/4 cup of flour, and I mixed it with a cup of oil, and I incorporated it very slowly to dissolve. So I'm just whisking it in as I incorporate it. Make sure it's fully incorporated. Now, when you start on this roux, you can't leave it. I'm sorry, it is a process. It may take about 35 minutes to brown. Now, your level of brown may differ from everyone else's. Some people like their roux really dark. I prefer mine not so dark. I don't know. It's just a preference. I don't want it blonde, so we're going to cook this, okay? And you'll see it actually transition to a darker roux. All right, so in a pot with I would say about 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil, go ahead and add your okra slurry. And the purpose of this really is to just cook a little bit of the slime out. Now, I prefer a little slime only because it thickens up the broth of the gumbo. So I like to control that level by I put a little bit, majority of it is in the oven, and it's cooking. It's going to cook out the slime completely. And also make it a little crunchy, but not too crunchy. I cooked it for I'd say about 30 minutes alongside the chicken. I'm also seasoning this slurry because I believe in seasoning every level of your base. All right, so now you see this roux is darkening well. Please do not stop stirring. Here's our pot of, we have seafood stock, and we also have about 6 cups of water and 2 tablespoons of chicken bouillon. I'm pretty much going back and forth between the, pot. I'm making sure that I do not leave my roux. I need my roux darker, and I don't want it burned. Okay, so you don't want to leave your roux too long. As a matter of fact, you want to be right by the stove. Here is where I'm actually dashing in some additional flavor. I'm adding seasoning. While I will admit that this was a bit premature on my part because this is flour, it will cook your seasonings. So this was a bit premature. I will not encourage you to do this. Actually, I would wait to add any type of seasonings when your roux is the desired color as well as the consistency that you desire. So don't add any seasonings until you add your vegetables to your roux, which you'll see momentarily. Okay, so this is what I was trying to avoid. My seasonings darkening with this roux. Oh my God, I could jump off a bridge. But honest to God, you guys, it turned out so good. I still would wait to do the additional seasonings to the roux. I would wait until after I actually add my vegetables, which you'll just see in a moment. You just add all the seasonings. You have your bell pepper, celery, and your onions. You want to keep stirring, of course, keep stirring, keep stirring. All right, so now you want to add to your roux all of your vegetables. You have your onion, you have your celery, you have your bell pepper, and you want to go ahead and turn that fire down to a little bit. Stir it all in, incorporate it. I think this would be the best time to add also your seasonings to the roux. Your Cajun seasonings, I added a little thyme earlier on. I may have added that to the actual stock, but you could do it here as well, okay? So you can actually go ahead and flavor up the roux. Again, I know I did indeed add a little garlic powder, garlic salt, and 2, you want to go ahead and add your minced garlic to this. At the very last minute, you want to add your minced garlic and only cook it for maybe about 30 minutes because you don't want your garlic to burn. Now, I'm going to really fully incorporate this until it actually, turns the veggies a little translucent. Cook them a little bit, and you see me adding the garlic. Yum, yum. Go ahead and fully fold that in, incorporate it, because what we're going to do is add this entire batch to our gumbo stock rather, okay? Okay, so this is how your gumbo roux should look. Now you can make yours darker. I made mine a real pretty milk chocolate. Keep in mind the color that you make, it will be the color of your gumbo, okay? So I like mine on the milk chocolatey side. So I'm adding that to the stock, the actual stock that has been kind of simmering. And I'm incorporating it, making sure that I stir it completely. As you can see, all of the vegetables are in now. And preparing all of your veggies ahead of time is what made this process so seamless to me. Just having everything lined up made it seamless. Oh, it's beautiful. Look at that beautiful broth. Okay, so here's where you want to add your thyme. I added about a half a tablespoon of thyme, oregano. I'm also adding my cooked and shredded chicken. Now, you don't have to shred it. You can actually put the thighs in there all together. They'll kind of shred as they cook because this is going to cook for 45 minutes. I'm adding my bay leaf. I'm adding about a half a tablespoon of oregano. I love herbs, so use as sparingly as you want, to your taste, of course, okay? The bay leaf gives it a very good flavor as well. I'm adding about a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. You can do like a half a tablespoon depending on the spice. I'm adding Cajun seasonings to this as well. I just like my gumbo full of flavor, so you can actually taste test it as it goes because pretty much everything that's put in is already cooked, okay? So if you want to add a little more gumbo filet to it, you can do that. I added about a little bit less than a tablespoon of gumbo filet. The recipe is I'm not sure exactly of the measurements. The recipe is at the end of this video. But yeah, I just incorporated everything and I mixed it as I went along. Okay, so remember the dehydrated shrimp. This is when you want to add that to the gumbo base, and you want to stir it in. Now, keep in mind, you're not going to really taste this. You're going to taste the flavor. It's going to give it an extra punch. I grinded it in a food processor. But it will completely dissolve. You won't have any bits in it, okay? This is how it should look when it's grind. Oh, my hands are ashy from all that washing of them, okay? So ignore. But yeah, this is the ground shrimp that I did in the dehydrator. In the food processor. Now, as you can see, I have my okra out of the oven. I have my chicken out of the oven. I have crab meat as well, crab finger meat, and then I have regular crab, king crab. It's probably the most expensive thing in the gumbo, the king crab. If you want to substitute it with something a little less expensive like blue crab or snow crab, you most certainly can. I just prefer, at this point in my life, I prefer king crab, and I will never make it without king crab again. It's like my favorite, but it is, super duper duper expensive. I'm not sure. I think I probably paid about $70 for the legs that I got, okay? It was the bulk of the money I spent really on the gumbo. So you see I have the cooked sausages, and I like to add a little corn. Don't shoot me, New Orleans. Okay, people, I love corn in my gumbo, okay? It is my gumbo. You can do with your gumbo what you choose. That's the good thing about being in America. We can do whatever we so choose with our food. All right, so here are all the remaining ingredients. And once this cooks for about 45 minutes, as you can see, I added the tomatoes. I added some of the corn already. Once this cooks for about 45 minutes, you can start adding your seafood and the remaining of your ingredients. Listen, you guys, I was having I was having eggnog and brandy while cooking. I have a good time while cooking. Look at my new Santa. I love him. I had to find him. I literally had to search high and low for me old chocolate covered Santa. Hello, Santa. I love you, my favorite. Yes. And my other favorite furry thing would be, that's my Miko. He watches from afar. He smells from afar. He loves to be with the family when we cook in the kitchen. So this is usually his spot, unless we catch him scavenging as usual, which always gets him sick. So we try to keep him out. All right, so this is how your gumbo should look. It's thickening. I let it cook after I add all of the remaining ingredients. And that would be your shrimp, your crab meat. Like I said, I added the corn. You can add that at the last minute as well. And I add the sausage at the very last minute because, again, I don't want just a seafood gumbo tasting like a very strong sausage like Kaneka or andouille. I want it to be like a special surprise in my mouth, not take over the entire pot of gumbo. I love seafood, so that's why I made gumbo, seafood gumbo. But the sausage was a really good addition. Like I said, it added a pop of flavor in your mouth. Once you got a little piece of andouille sausage, it's like, oh, tastes good. Yum, yum, yum. But yeah, look at these large pieces and it was bigger than a spoon. Can you tell? Large pieces of king crab that I added, and I will never use another crab. This was delicious, you guys. The best gumbo I've ever eaten, and this is how it looked plated. Bon appetit. Here are the official measurements for the gumbo. So I didn't want to leave that out. If you can, screenshot it. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. It was a pleasure sharing this with you. Toodles.